Diddy Combs has pleaded not guilty to several federal charges.
In a courtroom that could decide the fate of a music legend, Sean Diddy Combs, once known for shaping the sound of a generation, has now found himself at the center of a federal investigation that could send him to prison for a minimum of 15 years. On Tuesday, the embattled 54-year-old mogul appeared in federal court in Lower Manhattan, where he pleaded not guilty to a slew of serious charges, including racketeering, conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. The charges, which have rocked the entertainment world, stem from an indictment that paints a chilling portrait of a man who allegedly used his power, wealth, and influence to manipulate, control, and abuse those around him for decades. With the weight of a grand jury indictment pressing down, Diddy now stands to lose not only his freedom, but the empire he built over the last 3 decades. The scene inside the courtroom was tense as Diddy, a man once celebrated as the king of hip-hop, stood before a judge in shackles. His legal team, led by defense attorney MR.CHECKITOUT, made it clear that Diddy plans to fight these charges with everything he has. Agnifilo said at a press conference following the hearing,
Mr. Combs is a fighter. He's going to fight this to the end. He's innocent. He came to New York to establish his innocence. He's not afraid. He's not afraid of the charges. There's nothing that the government said in their presentation today that changes anyone's mind about anything. He's been looking forward to this day. He's been looking forward to clearing his name.
However, the judge's decision to deny bail was a significant blow to the defense, leaving Diddy behind bars until his trial. For a man who once lived in luxury, surrounded by opulence and adored by millions, the reality of his situation has never been starker. The details outlined in the unsealed 14-page indictment reveal an extensive and deeply disturbing pattern of behavior. According to the document, Diddy is accused of orchestrating a criminal enterprise that spanned decades, with the goal of fulfilling his personal sexual desires while maintaining his public image. Prosecutors allege that this enterprise involved sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice, charges that seem ripped from the pages of a crime thriller, not the life of a music mogul. The indictment alleges that Diddy abused, threatened, and coerced women and others around him to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct. To carry out these horrific acts, prosecutors claim, Diddy relied on an intricate network of people working for his Combs enterprises. This included high-ranking supervisors, security staff, household employees, and personal assistants, all allegedly tasked with facilitating the dark and depraved gatherings known as freak-offs. One of the most shocking aspects of the indictment is the mention of so-called freak-offs, which are described as drug-fueled sex gatherings where Diddy allegedly subjected his victims to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse. The indictment claims that during these events, the rapper-turned-businessman hit, kicked, threw objects at, and dragged victims, at times, by their hair. These brutal acts reportedly resulted in injuries that often took days or even weeks to heal. The imagery is disturbing and heartbreaking. A man who once sold out stadiums and hosted glamorous parties now stands accused of orchestrating events where women were subjected to unspeakable violence and degradation, all under the influence of drugs and alcohol. The indictment goes further, detailing how Diddy allegedly used his power to manipulate and control his victims in ways that go beyond physical abuse. It claims that Diddy maintained control over his victims through, among other things, physical violence, promises of career opportunities, granting and threatening to withhold financial support, and by other coercive means, including tracking their whereabouts, dictating the victim's appearance, monitoring their medical records, controlling their housing, and supplying them with controlled substances. In these passages, the picture of Diddy painted by prosecutors is one of a man who preyed on vulnerable individuals, bending their will to his, while maintaining a public persona that appeared untouchable. The alleged psychological warfare is just as damaging as the physical violence, showing how power and fame can be wielded in the most dangerous ways. Diddy's arrest on Monday night is just the latest development in a federal investigation that has been in the works for months. Back in March, federal agents raided 2 of his homes, one in Miami and one in Los Angeles, seizing a trove of evidence that painted a dark picture of what may have been going on behind closed doors. The agents reportedly found over 1,000 bottles of lubricant, narcotics, and 3 AR-15s, a startling discovery that raises more questions about the extent of Diddy's alleged crimes. What were these materials being used for, and how did they fit into the larger narrative of the sex trafficking and abuse charges? The raid was a major turning point in the investigation, signaling that the feds were not only serious about bringing charges, but that they were uncovering disturbing evidence that seemed to support the claims of Diddy's alleged victims. For a man who had spent his entire career career, carefully cultivating an image of success and power. The sight of federal agents carrying evidence out of his multi-million-dollar mansions must have been a harsh reminder that no one is above the law. At least 8 lawsuits have been filed against Diddy, each one describing a horrifying encounter with the mogul. These lawsuits paint a portrait of a man who allegedly used his charm, wealth, and connections to lure women into situations where they were then subjected to violence, rape, and coercion. Perhaps the most high-profile of these accusers is R&B singer Cassie Ventura, who was the first to publicly sue Diddy in November 2023. Her lawsuit alleged years of physical and sexual abuse at his hands, including a shocking 2016 incident where Diddy was caught on video attacking her in a hotel hallway. When that video was released in May, it was a bombshell that sent shockwaves through the media. In the footage, Diddy can be seen throwing Cassie to the ground, punching her, and dragging her by her hair. The violent outburst, captured on security cameras, was hard to watch and impossible to deny. In the aftermath, Diddy publicly apologized for the attack, admitting that his behavior was inexcusable.
I was up. I hit rock bottom, but I make no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable.
It was a rare moment of public contrition from a man who had built his career on being larger than life, untouchable, and unapologetic. But for many of his critics and accusers, the apology was too little, too late. Cassie's lawsuit was settled almost immediately after it was filed, but her courage in coming forward opened the floodgates for others who had been harboring their own painful experiences. As more victims came forward, the allegations against Diddy began to snowball, culminating in the federal charges he now faces. Once hailed as a trailblazer and visionary in the world of hip-hop, Sean Diddy Combs now faces the very real possibility that his legacy will be defined not by his music or business ventures, but by the allegations of abuse and exploitation that have surfaced. Diddy rose to prominence in the 1990s as the founder of Bad Boy Records, a label that launched the careers of superstars like the Notorious B.I.G., Mary J. Blige, Usher, and Lil' Kim. His influence on the music industry cannot be overstated. He helped define the sound of an era and, at the height of his career, was considered one of the most powerful figures in entertainment. But with power comes responsibility, and the allegations against Diddy suggest that he used his influence not for good, but to manipulate, control, and harm those around him. The contrast between the public persona he cultivated, a savvy businessman, a devoted father, a philanthropist, and the person described in the lawsuits, is striking. His legal team has worked hard to remind the public of Diddy's many contributions over the years. Mark Agnifilo, his attorney, described Diddy as a music icon, self-made entrepreneur, loving family man, and proven philanthropist who has spent the last 30 years building an empire, adoring his children, and working to uplift the Black community. While these statements may be true, they do little to counteract the growing pile of allegations. Agnifilo acknowledged that his client is an imperfect person, but insisted that Diddy is not a criminal.